Hello, and thank you for participating in the presentation today. I'm going to be speaking about a full spectrum macrobiotic approach to the coronavirus. Recent virus lockdown, businesses, and the self-quarantines of people from social isolation is being done to prevent people from getting sick. I'm going to address some important elements that we can do in addition to these things to help us to strengthen our immunity from any virus or any infections and toxicity in the environment. Natural immunity, in my experience over the many decades of helping people, is the key to staying healthy. And this is important because every year we're exposed to the seasonal flu. For instance, CDC, Center for Disease Control, estimates that the burden of illness during the 2018 to 2019 season included an estimated 35.5 million people getting sick with the flu, 16.5 million people going to a health provider for their illness, 490,600 hospitalizations, and 34,200 deaths. The number of influenza-associated illnesses that occurred last season was similar to the estimated influenza associated during the 2012-2013 influenza season, when an estimated 34 million people had symptomatic flu illness. So it looks like that these things are going to be with us, and for what's happening now and for the future, we need to really strengthen our immunity. And one of the things to understand is that when a flu goes through schools or businesses or the office, many people, many of the school children don't get sick, and many people in the offices don't get sick. And for those who do get sick, they get sick at varying degrees of seriousness. And this has a lot to do with our natural immunity. People with certain health conditions that compromise immunity, like diabetes and the elderly, and those with other illnesses, are most effective more seriously. And so there are steps that we need to do before and now that are more than just social distancing, which I'm going to be talking about. Now, in order to understand the basis of what I'm talking about and my experience of working with people and strengthening immunity over the last several decades, I'm going to be utilizing what I call a full spectrum macrobiotic approach. And this is, I want to explain a little bit about this before we get into the topic. Originally, what was called macrobiotic, which means longevity, teachings and practices that were taught in the late 20th century, was based on a fasting or cleansing diet, extremely low fat, extremely low sugar and protein diet that is effective for certain conditions, which I call conditions of excess. And for other people, this is not effective. And what I found after teaching this for many decades, close to 40 to 30 years or more, that some people did well on this and some people didn't. And then slowly I started to notice, pay attention more to the fact that many long-term teachers who were eating this diet themselves, close to a vegan, low-fat, low-protein diet without supplements, without herbs for the most part, were getting sick and dying of illnesses like cancer and heart disease. This made me start to question this, especially when the first person who I understood got ill and died of cancer. One of my teachers, Evelyn Kushi, passed away. So I started to look at what macrobiotic or longevity teachings taught around the world and what was missing and what could possibly make this more effective with the wonderful whole foods that I knew about. And I realized that around the world, people, particularly in Oriental medicine, valued moderate but regular amounts of natural animal foods. And then I started to do research to realize that for modern times and for longevity, certain key nutrients were important for certain people. A doctor in the 1950s first discovered that his name was Dr. Roger Williams, and he wrote several books and did research and explained how different people need different nutrient needs. And one of the research studies that he did was to check the vitamin needs of a certain litter of rats from the same mother, which are biologically connected to each other. And he found that their needs for certain nutrients were 10 or more times greater just to maintain their health. His idea then that humans, which are much more biologically diverse, need much greater focus on getting more nutrients for certain conditions. So I've discovered that adding some supplements and vitamins made a huge difference in healing and promoting health. And then also the role of herbs, particularly as they taught in China, herbal medicine based on diagnosis. Along with the full spectrum macrobiotic approach, I also started to put together different insights about health assessment and diagnosis, which I came to call IDX diagnosis, based on an understanding of the Oriental or Asian way of seeing from Chinese and other Oriental medicines of the body to diagnose the organs, along with modern biology, because I came to realize that what they were talking about was the same things that we were talking about when they're looking at the different parts of the body. They just had a different language, but they were really saying the same things that modern progressive biology talks about. And so I call this IDX diagnosis, and I interpreted this also according to progressive biology. For instance, in Oriental medicine, an energy deficiency, qi deficiency in China, can be looked at from a progressive biological viewpoint as a low metabolic state, which creates various diseases and needs to be corrected for health. So you can learn more about this at my website, macrobiotic.com, where I explain about my approach and the full spectrum macrobiotic approach to healing and health maintenance. Now, we're going to be talking about the importance of nutrients as part of this. And before we get into that, I just wanted to talk about something I'm going to use as a model, which I found very useful, an ancient Chinese macrobiotic longevity model that was used, called the three treasures. And the three treasures is a way of understanding the different parts of our body and mind and how they interact with each other and how we can address them for health, and in our case today, to strengthen immunity. So the three treasures are called essence, known as Jing in Chinese, energy, or Qi in Chinese, and then Shen, or spirit, which is the mind or consciousness, Shen or spirit in Chinese. And these three, the way that these are understood is that these can be compared to a candle. These are aspects of our body that are similar to a candle. So the wax and wick of the candle is like the substance of our body, which is the essence or the Jing, physicalized energy. Everything is seen as a form of energy. So the physicalized energy of our body known as Jing or essence. Then we have energy moving through the system that on a gross level is the nervous energy and the energy we derive from food, which is running all the organs and systems in the body. And they also saw this as a subtle energy called qi, which is the motivating force behind every function of the body and mind. And then this is akin to the heat coming off the candle. And then we have the light coming off the candle, which would be in the human system, the mind or consciousness. So these are the three treasures, and they're all connected to each other, and one affects the other for health. And we're going to start discussing uh, discussing how to strengthen your natural immunity by looking at the level of essence or Jing, or the substance of the body. And one of the crucial elements of the substance of the body, if not the most crucial, is the nutrients that we take in from food and supplements. And why this is so important, because they've found that for many, many health conditions, many organ functions, the immune function is really, and the immune function is related to the nutrients that we're taking in. And if the nutrients are lacking, then basically the immune function goes down, and this could be create more opening to disease and create disease states. There's many different ways we can understand this, but best illustrated by a story. I had a client who how certain kinds of conditions are related to the immune state. So we'll talk about nutrients first, and then we'll talk about the overall state of health that can affect people. For example, there's a story in a holistic health book about a Dr. Ragan Chatterjee that describes the moment he describes, and he does this in a TED Talk, where he talks about the problem he had with his baby. And he was on vacation when his wife cried out that their 6-month-old baby was immobile. Thinking the baby was choking, the doctor tried to clear his airway, but didn't work. They rushed the child to the hospital, where they found he had hypocalcemic convulsion due to a severe vitamin D deficiency, a preventable deficiency. Baby need intravenous calcium and high dose of vitamin D to save them. Although he had 14 years of medical training, he felt very unequipped to deal with this and being able to detect this preventable condition. And because of this caused him to rethink his entire practice of medicine. So this shows the crucial importance for nutrient deficiency. Another example of this is new research suggests that zinc helps control infections by gently tapping the brakes on immune response in a way that prevents out-of-control inflammation that can be damaging and even deadly. There are starting now to create ways to check someone's zinc status in the intensive care unit, particularly in people who have sepsis, but also in many, many conditions. And because zinc deficiency affects about 2 billion people worldwide, and including 40% of the elderly in the United States. We'll be talking about zinc a little bit later also. Another example of this comes from a researcher, Alfred Summer, who was one of the first people to really make the connection between vitamin A deficiency and night blindness. And vitamin A, which I'll be talking about a little bit later, has two forms. I'll go over this again. Preformed, which comes only from animal products or a supplement derived from animal products, and then proformed, actually. The preformed comes from beta carotene, but the body has to convert it, and it's not very efficient in converting carotene to vitamin A. So he was doing research. When he was looking over his research that he collected about children in night blindness in Asia and Africa, he found that children with night blindness, he found that certain children were dropping out of the survey. Then on further investigation, he found that children with night blindness were dying 3 times the rate of those with normal sight. So vitamin A deficiency is spreading severe, and mostly in third world countries, especially in Africa. This is probably most likely due, if you look closer at commonly due to infections, because they are more prone to getting infections. So this shows the importance of nutrients. Also, the overall condition of a person is important to check. And in recent times, because of certain experiences I've had, especially with certain clients, I do recommend people check their blood tests. One of the things that's being told about the coronavirus is that people with diabetes have to be careful because their immunity tends to be lower. And I had a client who had a severe problem with a tooth infection after an implant uh, because of undiagnosed condition of high blood sugar or diabetes. So because of this and other experiences, which compromised their immunity and caused a lot of problems and discomfort and pain, uh, and other connected problems from this high blood sugar. So since that experience and experience I've had with other clients, I do recommend that it's useful to get either annually or biannually blood test, which I can interpret and help people in my consultations. Because a lot of times the levels that are recommended to be normal are not normal according to holistic practitioners. And prediabetes is a major problem, which both diabetes and prediabetes is related to the person's overall health, which has to be addressed. And I have ways in the full spectrum macrobiotic approach I can address. Also, so before we get into more of this, also the things I'm going to be talking about are, in a sense, general, which are important for everybody. And when people need very specific advice to address their immunity, I do this in my full spectrum macrobiotic health counseling, which you could look at my website under the services. So getting back to the essence, one of the first things we can talk about that's important for strengthening immunity is having adequate protein in one's diet. And adequate protein, a diet that has grains and vegetables and beans, technically may on paper have adequate protein, but the quality of the protein is limited because of the composition of the vegetable proteins. And so often a person, especially certain kinds of people who require more protein or using more protein or are larger in size, need to get other sources of protein in their diet. And this is one of the reasons why that animal protein was used regularly and moderately, depending upon the person's condition, in all the longevity cultures and health teachings in the world. The technical reason why this happens is because protein does many things for the body, getting adequate protein. But one of the things that it does is it produces a kind of immune cell called immunoglobulins. And if so many people do better if they're open to that, along with eating adequate calories to get protein from grains, beans, vegetables, and some fruits, is also to make sure that the person also is eating at least some animal protein moderately daily. The amount would vary depending on the person's condition, from 1 time a day to 3 times a day, or almost every day, in order to get adequate protein. And this will vary from person to person. There is people who are severely deficient will find that the immunoglobulins are deficient in a blood test. Other people, it may not show up until there's a great deficiency. So this is important. If a person is open to eating animal foods or animal proteins from natural sources like grass-fed meats, pastured poultry, then it would be wise to incorporate some of those in their diet. If a person is eating only fish, they should eat fish more often. If a person is vegetarian, I'd recommend to eat regularly some eggs from pasture-raised animals and some dairy from grass-fed animals. And if someone is vegan, I recommend to supplement with protein powders from rice or pea and certain supplements, because animal protein has certain nutrients that animal foods have certain nutrients that only are in animal food, and vegetable foods have certain nutrients that are only in vegetable foods. On my website, if you'd like to learn more about this, and if you're vegetarian or vegan, I have an article called How to Be Safe on a Vegan Vegetarian Diet. Also, in addition, so protein is in natural animal foods. If people are eating some natural animal foods regularly, moderate amounts daily, and eating enough food, then that's enough to get adequate protein to create something called immunoglobulins. People have to be careful on low carb diets, because if the carbs are really low and the fat is not enough, then the person starts to use up the proteins in their diet to run their energy, to burn for energy, and they won't have enough protein available for these immune cells. Natural fats, a certain amount of moderate amounts of natural fats from saturated fats and moderate saturated fats are important, because your white blood cells, they boost the white blood cell production, which is your immune cell production. In addition, another nutrient that's missing in modern diets is vitamin A. And vitamin A from vegetable foods like carrots and greens is not as bioavailable for many people. And because it's not really true vitamin A, it's something that your body can convert to vitamin A. And true vitamin A is only in natural animal foods. The highest amount in fish is in sardines, and then it's also in things like natural eggs. It's also in very high amounts in liver from naturally raised animals, very high amounts from sardines. And if you don't basically eat those foods, it's important then to get a vitamin A source. Good quality cod oil can give that, cod liver oil, and also a supplement of vitamin A. But if you take a vitamin A supplement, you need to take it with vitamin D and K2 to balance it. Vitamin D is another missing nutrient in the modern diet. And basically the D is available in certain foods, but it's also available in things like more fatty fish. It's available in certain kinds of mushrooms. It's available in eggs and raw milk. The D that people get in their conventional milk is not as bioavailable. There's a very small amount in there. And you need to be exposed to the sun for 20 minutes daily in order, with a large amount of your skin, in order to produce it. And it's kind of hard to do that in the Northern Hemisphere. So vitamin D supplements can be taken or eaten in foods. It's very high in sardines. So on a physical level, other nutrients include things like selenium, B12, if you're not eating natural meats. All these things are important, and I talk about this in my blog. So on a physical level, you need a certain amount of nutrients. You also need a certain amount of food. On one hand, eating too much food can be harmful for the body, but usually people eat too much food when eating highly processed foods. When eating whole foods, basically you just need to eat enough foods and enough carbohydrates in order to run your metabolism, to make it active. So on the physical level, on the physical level in lifestyle, adequate sleep is really important. If you don't get enough sleep, then the body starts to go into stress, and it doesn't rebuild itself. The immune system is active at night, cleaning up virus and bacteria and repairing damage and repairing your body. So on the physical level, sleep is important. The right amount of exercise on the physical level is really important also too, because if you do too much exercise, it weakens the immune system. A lot of athletes understand this. If they overtrain, they get colds and flus easily. If you don't do enough exercise, it weakens the circulation in the body. So there's a balance. So on the level of essence, we need to take care of our food. We also need to take care of we need a balanced diet, which I call a full spectrum macrobiotic eating, which is whole foods, focusing mostly on whole foods with grains and vegetables, natural animal foods if you eat them, or supplements if you don't. I talk about this in my blog post. And also seasonings, natural fats, natural mild amounts, natural sweets. So this would be more on a physical level. You need a substantial amount of nutrient-dense food, which with this kind of food, you can read about this more on my website, macrobiotic.com. What is a macrobiotic diet? Macrobiotic means longevity. And this is based on what traditional people ate around the world, include natural meats and dairy and other foods that people are open to that. Then on an energetic level, we could talk about energy on a different level. So basically on the energetic level of the body, food has an energetic effect. And this is something I talked about in the allergy lecture, that food has an energetic effect. And we have to understand the energetic effect of food in order to understand what is helpful and what's harmful for our immunity. And as I mentioned in the allergy lecture, the diet that traditional people around the world have commonly eaten is called a clear light diet. It's focused on cooked grains and vegetables, moderate amounts but regular amounts of natural animal foods, and some dairy products in some cultures, natural seasoning, natural fats, moderate amounts of natural sugars, local fruits, local vegetables, a variety of these things. And this is something in my classes, if you want to learn more about this, I have a diagnosis plus nutrition health coach training. And in general, this kind of diet ensures immunity because it ensures better digestion. And the digestive process in the ancient Chinese model, which I found has been the most eloquent for a global view of digestion, is that our digestive system is kind of like a cooking pot and a stove. And anything that fosters the body's ability to create heat in the digestive system and the breakdown of food is basically important for digestion and overall energy and health. And the idea why this is important, along with the right kind of lifestyle where we don't do too much, we don't put too much energy out, we don't put too little, so we don't exhaust ourselves, is that the immune system in Chinese medicine and other Oriental medicines was considered the most active and most aggressive part of the energy of our system. We called it Wei Qi. It's internal in the body and on the surface of the body. On the surface of the body, it's protecting us from virus and bacteria. And it's related to the modern understanding. One of the things of my full spectrum macrobiotic approach is to combine a modern and traditional view, traditional Eastern view of energy with the modern view of the body. So we have immune cells in our outside of our body that modern biology recognizes that knocks out virus or bacteria when it lands on us. And that's what they're talking about in Oriental medicine as the Wei Qi. And when the overall vitality of the body is good, then this immune energy, or you may call it an immune shield, is very good. And one part of that is digestion, good digestion. So what fosters the cooking pot and the stove is food that is warm. What knocks it out is cold food, like raw foods, cold drinks, especially with meals, cold foods with meals. Cooked food, because it's pre-digested. And human beings don't have the ability to really digest raw food because we don't have a rumen, which is a stomach that has bacteria in it. All the animals that eat raw diets have a stomach with bacteria. Our bacteria is in our colon. So we need cooked foods. And then we need moderate amounts of foods that are rich, but are harder to digest. So if we overeat them, they can weaken digestion. This includes natural meats, poultry, fish, eggs, and dairy products. If overeaten, that weakens the body. If not eaten at all, it also weakens the system because your digestive system has muscles that need protein and nutrients like B vitamins. So there's a balance how much it's eaten. Modern versions of this are usually overly rich, like grass-fed meat is low in fat, while commercial conventional meat is basically very high in fats, which makes it harder to digest. We need natural sugars in moderate amounts for most people, but if we eat large amounts of them, it's very hard on the digestive system. And can't go into everything that would cause this, but basically if we either skip meals or we eat overly rich processed foods in modern diet, or we are missing something that basically if we eat a meager diet that's too narrow, as people do when they are skipping meals or eating certain kinds of diets like raw foods diets or vegan diets that are not balanced, then basically what happens, the digestion suffers. And if it suffers or not, it can get very congested and swollen and irritated, and then basically create a condition, which I talked about in the allergy lecture, called dampness. And in a damp condition where there's swelling and congestion in the lungs and sinuses and the digestive tract, bacteria, and including viral bacteria, virus infections and bacterial infections can easily enter. So basically on the energetic level, we need to have the right kind of food that basically can help us get more energy and overall vitality. On the energetic level, we also need to foster our energy by doing things like breathing, which is the main sources of energy we get is from the air and from our food, according to traditional Oriental thinking, which I found to be correct. So breathing exercises like Qigong and yoga breathing build up the health of the body. And generally, moderate exercise makes you breathe, so it's helpful. Qigong exercise takes it to another level because a lot of people are operating in a stress mode because of lifestyle, diet, or thinking, various stresses that are affecting them. And people are running in what's called the sympathetic mode or the stress mode. And exercises like Qigong, meditation, and breathing get people out of the sympathetic into the parasympathetic mode, which basically makes them save energy. Getting good sleep, eating regular times, having a regular lifestyle, and not exhausting yourself, having good rest balanced by activity in your workday. These are all things that preserve your energy. Getting rid of toxins in the environment, these are things that preserve your energy. Then on the level of the mind, we have to basically make sure that the mind, especially at this time, doesn't get overactive, whether it be with fear or anxiety about any aspect of our lives. Some of that is managing our lives or taking time to do the right things to manage it. And some of it is having practices which can foster a more calm mental state. Recently, if you haven't seen it, you check on my blog post, I talked about a very simple breathing and meditation practice. And this meditation practice can help you to stay calm and to help get you out of the stress mode and train you to stay in a calm state to deal with basically stressful circumstances, such as the coronavirus going on right now. Now, I'm going to open up to questions when we have the lecture a little bit later, but I thought basically I would also talk about, finish up this part of the session by talking about a few things that I found that are helpful not only for prevention, but also when a person gets sick or starts to have the symptoms of sickness. One of the supplements that is extremely helpful for overall health and has been used for basically 70 years to treat over 30 major diseases is vitamin C. And although people talk about this having to come from a natural source, the vitamin C that has been made synthetically in the laboratory, which is much more available for people, is much easier to buy and to utilize. And so taking something like 500 milligrams or 1,000 milligrams of ascorbic acid 3 times a day is also, besides using supplements like zinc and selenium, vitamin D, K, 2, and A, are very helpful to keep your immunity strong. And this can really strengthen the body. So I recommend that now at this time if a person's open to it. And the synthetic one that's available that's less expensive has been proven to be as effective as the ones that are food derived, which most of them have some synthetic anyway in it. When a person is sick, one natural strategy is to take more vitamin C, 1,000 milligrams every hour or two, to help boost the immune system because a virus or infection uses up a tremendous amount of vitamin C. And you could do this for several days. Now, the only exception is that some people get very loose stools, diarrhea if they take a lot, and they can't take as much as another person would Some people also get bothered by the acidity of ascorbic acid and they need to take the buffered C. After taking this, when you have symptoms of a cold or a flu, or coughing or tiredness, once those are gone, then a person can cut back their vitamin C. Another natural remedy that I'll share with you that has been used for all kinds of flus, viruses, or colds that is an amazing, effective remedy is the natural. This is a natural herb supplement formula from China that's renowned for being used for colds and flus and viruses, and it's called yin chow, YINCHIAO. And when a person basically has the beginning symptoms of a runny nose or congestion or just unusual tiredness or sore throat, you could start taking these. When you get this, look for the yin chow that it comes in pressed tablets. You'll see it comes in little bottles and pressed tablets available online. And what you do is you take 5 or 6 pills every 2 hours or 3 hours for the first 9 hours, and then you take it every 4 or 5 hours as needed. And for many people, this basically can knock out the symptoms or moderate the symptoms of a virus when you take it right in the beginning of that. Now, so this would be one thing that you can take that would be very, very helpful. And this is not taken for prevention, but if you wanted to take something for prevention, there's another Chinese formula called Gan Mao Ling, Gao Mao Ling, GAOMAOLING. And this can also be taken in the beginning of symptoms, but it's also known as being taken half a dosage as prevention. I mentioned in my blog post about the coronavirus that also there's a traditional formula for prevention called Jade Screen Protector. And this basically has herbs that strengthen the immunity. I also mentioned the herb, and if you look at my blog post, I have which is on the lungs, and the lungs are very closely connected to immunity. I talk about the famous Chinese tonic herb astragalus, which is also made into a tea or taken as an extract to strengthen immunity. If you have the beginnings of a virus, then you stop taking it. We can talk more about this, but usually when people have a virus, eating becomes more simple, like soups and stews that are easy to digest. So this would be the kind of basic format. This is a large topic. The last thing I would just mention is that a lot of times people in natural health and the macrobiotic approach of the late 80s was against the use of supplements with the idea that these supplements are more artificial. But I found there's a good argument for people taking a high potency multi as a prevention and taking some other of these supplements as a prevention because of several factors. The famous doctor in the 1950s was the first to talk about this, Dr. Roger Williams, and he found that people have different needs for different amounts of nutrients. Some people have a higher need for nutrients than you can get from food. And so he talked about this with, he actually explained about this with rats from the same litter, same mother, who basically have been found to have 10 to 20 times more nutritional needs than other rats in the same litter. And he said human beings, which are much more genetically diverse, need much more. So this would be one reason why we would need more, some vitamin supplements to help us. So vitamin C, zinc, selenium are the preventative ones. As I said, C in higher amounts. So thank you very much for listening to this presentation,